How's it going, folks? Senor Stewie here. New year, new nickname. Huh? What are you going to do about it? 2022 finished, didn't it? And it's now the year of our Lord 2023. I've never truly understood that. It doesn't seem fair at all. We've had 2023 of these things. Let someone else have a go. Can't it be the year of Kevin? Eh? Not that one. But listen, I hope you've all had a lovely Christmas and then a lovely New Year, in that order. Have to address the elephant in the room. Bit of a lack of content over the last few months here on the channel. That's because naturally, at that time of the year, every year, I like to take a bit of time off to do my own stuff. This time around though, I had the added combo of being incredibly ill as well, which is always fun. But that break and ill meant that I didn't get a chance to chat to you guys about what I was watching during November and December. Madness, I know. And I know last time around it was a bit of a mammoth edition because I didn't talk to you about September and October, and then ended up stitching those two together in the last month on Letterboxd for you. But listen, my middle name is Consistency, so we're doing it again. I'm merging 2 months, and we're going to chat about everything I watched in November and December of last year. My middle name isn't Consistency, though. It's just Thomas. But listen, before we get into the good and proper nitty-gritty of this video, this is the point where I remind you that if you're enjoying this, hit subscribe, hit the like button. Helps me out big time. There's also links to my socials down there, including my Letterboxd, which you can follow and see this stuff I'm about to talk about in real time as it happens. So I think on that note, we should talk about some films that I done watched. Listen though, before we get into November and December, I need to address something which was a big slip up on my part, and that is that on the last month on Letterboxd, that September and October Mammoth Edition one, I missed 2 films for you guys. I know, I'm sorry, I was kind of hoping no one would notice, but some of you did. And you said, Stu, what's going on here? I've just seen 2 films that you didn't talk about there. What's going on? So before we get into the month's good and proper, I gotta talk about those, haven't I? I gotta talk about those. Pinocchio, I'm not gonna call it the full thing. We know it's Guillermo del Toro's. Listen, I've done a full review for it, so you can find a link for that down in the description below. Pulls off the rare double cheat code whammy of stop motion animation and Tilda Swinton. Yeah, at this point it's a little known fact that if Tilda Swinton's in your film, I'm gonna enjoy it. And she was in this film. And I did enjoy it. 4 whole ruddy stars. Then I watched The Mutilator, and listen, this is a big sort of gap in my 80s slasher film watching realm, right? I love a good slasher. You guys know this already. I have a whole load of Arrow Blu-rays of old 80s slashers, and some of them are untouched. This was one of those, and I was like, I'm gonna finally do it. You know, I'm gonna fucking sit and watch this thing that's been sat on my shelf for 5 years now. God, it was good. So good. Everything I want from an 80s slasher. 3 stars alone for having its own sitcom-style theme tune. That's right. I don't know how to fully express how much joy this brings me, but The Mutilator has its own sitcom opening, like theme tune, like imagine the cheesiest 80s sitcom theme tune. It has that over a montage of its characters doing things and driving somewhere. It is the greatest thing I've ever seen. No hyperbole. 4.5 stars for The Mutilator. But now we've addressed those 2 film-shaped elephants in the room from the last video I did. You can all put your pitchforks down and we can get into November. What a month that was, huh? Felt an awful lot like the other months of the year. Look at it. Look at that cute thing. I don't even have to scroll to get through it all. I can just sit there and enjoy it. We start the month off on the 5th with a Terrifier double bill. Can you tell that I was exhausted from film watching in October, that I just didn't watch films for like a whole week? But no, I'd been very interested about the Terrifier films. I didn't really know much about them until the new one came out. The first one was a stupidly low budget slasher film from 2016 about a clown that just kills people. Which is pretty much all you need to do in a slasher film, really. This has a lot of ingredients to land, just a little too hopelessly degrading and cruel to really take off. Yeah, that is the sort of main thing, and it's intentional. It's obviously by design, but it is incredibly just let's put 2 young women through absolute hell. And you know, it's just not a hugely fun watch, really. It has some of the most insane graphic kills I've maybe ever seen in a slasher in it. So it does have to get props for the special effects department on this one. I mean, it's kind of nuts. Amazing prosthetics. But yeah, I don't ever want to watch this one again. I'm happy having just seen it to get to the next one and to have been a part of the conversation, I guess, and know what people are talking about. 2.5 stars for the Terrifier. Then obviously, it's a double bill. You can't have a double bill without the second part. Otherwise, it'd just be a bill. So we watched Terrifier 2, the new one. that came out. And it's a significant upgrade on the first one in almost every department, I think. Way too long, but honestly, I kind of dug this. Improves on the first in almost all areas and continues the honestly amazing practical effects of the first. I kind of love that he was like, let's just do as much as we want of this thing, people will watch it. And he does do it, and it never really lets up on the things you want to see in a Terrifier film, but it is just a bit too long. Like, he could have shaved off a good amount of this film and still had the intended impact, I think. But still, the practical effects, amazing. A little bit more to it than just, let's watch women get mutilated, which I appreciate, seeing just a bit more flesh around that, a bit of an actual story, but actual characters we care about. 3.5 stars for Terrifier 2. Next up was a rewatch of what is now, spoilers for when I do put my eventual best of the year video out, but you know this already. My favourite film of last year was After Sun. I saw it again on the 15th of November. It ruined me at the film festival. It ruined all the press in that room at the film festival. And so I thought, hey, it's out in cinemas now. I'm going to take my girlfriend and we can be ruined together. I want to cry every time I think about it. The most accurate review I could have possibly written for After Sun. Again, you can find a link to the full review for that in the description below. My God, Charlotte Wells, completely crushing though. So if you haven't watched it yet, just obviously buckle in. It's on Mubi now, so you can watch it from the comfort of your own home. And self-plug, I've got a 30-day free trial code for Mubi, so you can find a link for that down there as well, or on the screen, depending on what one I want to do. 5 stars for After Sun. Then I watched the new Marvel one. I don't need to say this again, I feel like I say it every time, but Marvel hasn't really been doing it for me this phase. I think we finished the phase right now, right? So we can all call it what it was. Shit. But the last one was Black Panther Wakanda Forever, obviously the sequel to Black Panther. Obviously dealing with the incredibly tragic and sad passing of Chadwick Boseman, Black Panther. I mean, it was just as silly as most of Marvel's films have been lately. Listen, the opening was touching and nice. There are lots of really cool and effective moments throughout, but colour me surprised that a director's sincere attempts to attack the grief of losing an actor didn't mesh well with the MCU's need for a big action sequel. But obviously, I want our characters to go through it. I want to explore grief, but the exploration of grief in this film is about as deep as just going, he died and you're all sad about it, aren't you? And then the character's doing exactly what you think they're going to do about that for about a 5-minute scene. They shout a bit, and then they just do the normal Marvel shit. And then at the end, it's like, hey, here's a reminder that he died. The end. 2.5 stars. Good riddance. Phase 4 of Marvel. Next one I watched on the 22nd of November was Falling for Christmas. Maybe early to start watching Christmas films in a year. I don't know. What's everyone's opinions on when you can and can't stop? I hope you can stop. When you can and can't start watching Christmas films in a year. I felt like November 22nd was fine, right? I mean, the film came out. Throw it a bone. It came out, I watched it. Of course, this is a new Lindsay Lohan led Christmas rom-com from Netflix. What in God's fuck was all I had to say about this film. This was mental. This was a legitimately crazy film. I gave it a very low score, but I want you to know that it also, I could have happily given it the full 5 stars. Because in terms of viewing experience, I mean, it was absurd and I had a great time. But the film is completely awful. And a very dangerously creepy Santa figure in here. If you've seen it, what the hell is up with that guy? 1 star for Falling for Christmas. Not a great start to the Christmas viewings of 2022, let's put it that way. Or the best start, depending on which way you want to look at it. I don't know. Next up, it was another rewatch for a film I caught at the film festival that finally came out in cinemas, and that was Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery. I've already got a review for it. Link in the description below if you want to see my full thoughts on Knives Out 2 or Glass Onion. What did people want to call it? Because I feel like Glass Onion and Knives Out mystery is too long. Glass Onion. It's just called Glass Onion. Slaps even more on rewatch. So much hidden in plain sight. This is the best thing about rewatching sort of murder mysteries, is noticing the little details that may or may not have been there, just staring you in the face that you missed because of the art of misdirection. But it's just amazing that he hid so much in plain sight. I love that shit, yeah. Fully love this film. 4.5 stars for Glass Onion. Then I watched a film which has been on my watch list for so long. So long. And I've just never got round to it. And I don't know. I just felt like it finally. What are we going to do to get a medal or something? I don't know. Sorcerer, the William Friedkin film from 1977, in which a group of men have to transport dynamite, which is an incredibly volatile, explosive substance, on trucks through a rainforest. It is the most my butt cheeks have been clenched in a film for years. This was absolutely nuts. Friedkin is a fucking lunatic. He is a lunatic. This film is nuts. I'm repeating what I wrote in the review, but I have to. There are sequences in this film which are so visceral, and disgustingly tense. My God, it is a sweaty watch. The drawbridge sequence in this film is one of the best sequences in cinema I've seen for years. This is a classic. This has immediately landed itself among my favorites just on that first watch. I loved this film. It was so good. A full 5 stars for Sorcerer. If you haven't watched Sorcerer and you want to watch a classic that's a good, tense, sort of straightforward time, watch this one. It is a banger. But I watched another classic after this to round out my watches for November on the 28th, and that was Double Indemnity. Again, a film which has been on my watch list for stupidly long, and I don't know, apparently November was a month for me to just be like, hey, let's go through all the films I want to be watching. Big fan of film noir films. This is, depending on who you ask, the film noir film to watch. So I had some high expectations going in, and it delivered. Yeah, it slaps. It's a banger. Every line of this thing was smooth as shit, and I want to be shouted at in an office by Edward Robinson. I do. I love old film noir screenplays, and the things they'll say to each other are just chef's kiss. Also, ending of this film, I'm not the first, I won't be the last to say it. Complete all-timer ending. 4.5 stars for Double Indemnity. And that's November done, so we're on to the next one, which is, say it with me everyone, December. December was a bigger one than November, I'll say that. I'd got out of my sort of like, exhaustion with watching films after October, and we just had a regular old month for movie viewing. Where do we start? On the bloody 1st this month. No waiting around, straight in there. And it was a rewatch of one of my sort of favourite kind of classic comedies. It's not the best classic comedy, but this just has a place in my heart. I don't know, I'm stupidly nostalgic for this film, and it makes me feel comforted and just warm. It's Billy Madison, the Adam Sandler film in which he goes back to school and does this voice for 2 hours. I love it. It's so good. So dumb, I love it. There we go. Short and sweet review, doesn't need anything else. When a kid pisses himself, and then he notices, so he pisses himself to make it seem like it's cool to piss yourself in front of the kids. Charming stuff. I used to have the stupidest crush on the teacher in this film. Still do. 4 stars. Then we watched The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. That's a Christmas watch, right? There's snow in it. I used to love the Narnia BBC adaptation when I was a kid. And I remember when this one came out in the cinema, I was at that age where just everything you see in the cinema bangs, just slaps left, right and centre. And I don't know why, but we just had a craving to watch it. So we whacked it on. Listen. It's not great, is it? Only now am I really coming to terms with the fact that Santa shows up halfway through this film and arms 4 kids for battle. We don't talk about this enough. I'd completely forgot this happens in the film, but Santa appears and gives them weapons for battle. Fucking mental film. 3 stars. Then I caught a film which I've been meaning to see for a long time, and I don't think it got a UK release. It was being shown at picture houses as part of a season from the Tape Collective of films that hadn't been released that deserve an audience. So I went and saw Lingua Franca, which is the latest Isabel Sandoval film. God, it's good. A genuinely wonderful, wonderful little gem of a film. This is the first of Sandoval's film I've seen, and I was struck by just how textured and sensual it is. Such a good-looking film. I can't believe how well shot this film is. But yeah, just a wonderful perspective from a trans immigrant, right? So we've got 2 different sort of cultural identities to explore in the film there, and I think it does both of those wonderfully. It's a really wonderful little gem. I seriously recommend it. 4 stars for Lingua Franca. Then I watched another classic which I hadn't seen before that had been on my list for a while because I love these directors. It's the Coen brothers. This was their first film, Blood Simple. Cannot believe it's taken me this long to watch their debut, and holy shit, what an amazingly effective slow burn thriller, littered with everything we've grown to love about the Coen style, but just like in that charming incubation period. Yet it's so satisfying to watch the things you love about a director sort of being birthed, like the seeds of those things in their first early stuff. And this is absolutely that tenfold for the Coen brothers. I loved it. I think it just sort of ramps up and it only gets better and better. And I love the end of this thing. And it just has this real kind of dirty feel to it that I love. I think that's something that I've grown to really love about a lot of 80s thrillers. The De Palmas, Coen brothers here with Blood Simple. That kind of real sort of seediness to a lot of the dark nature of thrillers in that era. Love it. Love the way they look. Love this film. So good. 4.5 stars for Blood Simple. November and December really were months for me to get through some classics, right? I know my usual thing is that I want to get a classic watched each month. I'm ticking this off. I'm getting through the classics. Next one wasn't a classic, and probably isn't soon to be a classic. It was something from Tiffany's. Another straight to streaming Christmas film from 2022. This time starring Zoe Dutch, who I adore. So it already has that kind of like get out of jail free card, but I'm gonna enjoy it because she's so good, especially leading rom-coms. It does pain me to admit that this essentially just ended up being rom-com cliches strung together in a daisy chain of not much chemistry. It sort of does exactly what you want from it, so it's always difficult to rate rom-coms in that sense, but it really was just every cliche in the book. I think this would have really benefited from a stronger central chemistry, because if you don't have that chemistry in a rom-com, suddenly all of the things which are, let's face it, frankly strange and borderline toxic about rom-com relationships, they suddenly become more apparently toxic, right? When you're not in their relationship, you just think, what are you doing to each other? You are all making terrible choices. This is a film that's filled with terrible choices, and I just didn't love them enough to get past those terrible choices, which is really all a good rom-com needs to do. Just needs to convince us that people are in love enough to do stupid things. This one is just people doing stupid things. It wasn't that great. 2.5 stars for Something from Tiffany's. And then it was about this time in December that I started to get really ill. I just suddenly got stupidly ill. So I had a few sick days, which obviously means I went to Twitter and asked you guys for suggestions on what to watch while you're feeling down, things to pick you up that you like watching. And I was suggested from Charlie, my buddy on Twitter, to watch the Simpsons movie, which I hadn't seen for so long. So obviously I watched it. Man, this thing has so many great Simpsons jokes in there. I will say though that this time around the animation is starting to look rougher than I remembered. The animation feels a bit clunky in the way it sort of meshes that kind of early 2000s 3D animated style with the hand-drawn Simpsons style. It's looking a bit weird now when you watch it, and it is a bit distracting. Still fun enough though. 3.5 stars for the Simpsons movie. Then the next one that was suggested that day was Intergalactic, which is the new Kid Cudi film. It's using that kind of Into the Spider-Verse animation style to really good effect. It's very creative, obviously scored by Kid Cudi as well. This is definitely a much needed and charming pick-me-up. Great animation and characters / relationships I rooted for. Pretty by the books in terms of themes and romantic narrative, but nonetheless a lovely little time. Having just said I watched Something from Tiffany's and felt not much chemistry between them, there was a load of chemistry between them in this, and it really, really helped elevate above those sort of by the numbers rom-com cliches. It was a good time, a nice little gem that was much needed in my ill days of death. 3.5 stars for Intergalactic. Then my dear friend Ren recommended I watch Treasure Planet, and obviously I said yes, 1,000 times yes, because I think it's probably my favorite Disney animation. It's so good. Treasure Planet. If you're a non-believer in Treasure Planet, I don't want to hear from you. The montage to Goo Goo Dolls, cinema. Now I'm aware that it's not technically Goo Goo Dolls, it's I can't remember the lead singer's name, but it's that dude. But it's such a good montage, probably one of the best montages in all of Disney. God, it's so good. I love this film. I just love this film. Even Martin Short as the stupidly obnoxious robot should get irritating, but I just love it. I just love it, and I think it looks so good. And having just said that I thought the Simpsons movie is looking rough for trying to mix that kind of 3D animation with the Simpsons 2D style, for some reason it just works in Treasure Planet. I'm not sure what it is about it. It just works. 4.5 stars for Treasure Planet. Then I watched a film which, this might be sacrilege that this is the first time I've watched it, but I'd never seen it before. I'd seen it in fragments because it's the film it is, but I'd never watched it the full way through, so I decided to watch it. And that film was Planes, Trains and Automobiles, which was, I believe, suggested to me by my buddy old pal Pete over at Game Over Reviews. And look, obviously it's a classic for a reason. There's something stupidly comforting and sort of like a warm hug, right, about John Hughes' films, and this one isn't really much different. This was delightful. The music was sensationally 80s. It really was, in such a fantastic way. The music borderline doesn't fit, but it's that sort of 80s time when they were like, put it in. Just put it in. There's nothing I can say about this that hasn't already been said. John Candy, absolute fucking legend. I still get sad that he is no longer with us. Like, it feels like he should still be alive, and he's just an absolute comedy legend. As is Steve Martin, of course. The duo, so great together. 4 stars for Planes, Trains and Automobiles. Then I watched another new Christmas film to tick off the list that went straight to streaming, which is Spirited, an Apple TV one, which is, I didn't realise, an adaptation of the Scrooge story, The Ghosts of Christmas Past, Present and Future, all that stuff, starring Will Ferrell and Ryan Reynolds, and it wasn't very good. It has its charming moments, and it has some sequences of merit in here, but there's a few things that bugged me about it. we'll get into them. Pasek and Paul have one song and we're never going to stop hearing it, are we? I'll say it again. After Greatest Showman, they shouldn't have been allowed to make music for films afterwards. And they've just continued though. And Hollywood loves getting these guys to write their hits. And sure, it obviously works. It's great and successful for Hollywood. But the musicals aren't good because they're the same song. They have one song and it's not great. And add to that people that can't sing, singing it. It's very irritating. 2.5 stars for Spirited. Then I caught up on another film which took a while to come out in the UK. I believe it's a 2022 release in the UK, but 2021 everywhere else in the world. And that was After Yang, which is the latest Kogonada film. Like Kogonada's previous Beauty, I think this one is going to take another watch to truly absorb and appreciate, but on first watch, really loved it as a unique and tender rumination on identity and loss. And I'm such a sucker for films about learning new things about someone after they've gone. That is such a specific aspect of death and grief that I always just find immediately captivating in a film. And After Yang is obviously entirely about that, but also weaves in really great stuff on cultural identity. Just a gorgeous film through and through, really beautiful. And again, like Kogonada's previous one, I think on rewatch, it's only going to get better. Great performances, really quiet and restrained film overall, which is something I really appreciate about Kogonada's work, just through everything he's done. 4 stars for After Yang. And then later that day, I caught up on another 2022 film, which I missed at the multiple times I could have seen it. That film was The Lost City. I think the real reason I wanted to watch it was Daniel Radcliffe. Like, I think I just have a drive to watch Daniel Radcliffe's films now because he just picks weird roles and I enjoy that. This wasn't awful, had fun with it. It is probably the most kind of moderate review I could give a film on Letterboxd if I tried. It was fine. Everyone's doing exactly what you think they're going to be doing in the film. Has some fun set pieces. It's a good enough action comedy time. 3 stars for Lost City. Then I caught up on a documentary which I've been meaning to see for a while. I missed it in cinemas, which I'm very annoyed about because everyone was saying, watch this documentary in cinemas. That one is Fire of Love, which is a documentary about the Crafts, who are a French scientist couple that specialize in volcanic activity. And they would take cameras along and film everything they do. And they just go and check out volcanoes around the world. But God, this was so good. This was a brilliant documentary. I absolutely couldn't recommend it enough. Jesus, this was stunning. I want to watch hours and hours of the Crafts footage. Mesmerizing. Yeah, there's something so kind of endearing and captivating about all of the footage these guys were able to capture. Firstly, it looks kind of effortlessly incredible because it's volcanic activity that they're filming, but also this kind of weird filmmaking quality to them. They don't want to call themselves filmmakers, but they are filming things and framing things in this really kind of fun and charming way. Like, there's little moments where you're like, they're loving filming this stuff with their camera. And I think that comes through and makes for an incredibly entertaining and sort of mesmerizing watch. 4 stars for Fire of Love. Then I watched that new Avatar film, didn't I? Got out and saw it. We went and saw it in IMAX 3D, which is obviously, I guess, the way to watch this film. This was also in IMAX 3D, but the high frame rate was so distracting that I'm actually not confident I can properly rate the film yet. Could be higher. We'll need a regular 2D watch to be sure. Yeah, listen, we shouldn't let filmmakers do that whole high frame rate thing. It's never really worked when they've done it. This was the most distracting I've seen it just because of the way that it switches in and out of that. The scenes where it has it feel video gamey, and the scenes where it doesn't have it, because they are next to shots that do have it, feel slow and jittery because of it. Just leave it alone. Like, 24 frames is fine. We've had it for the entirety of cinema. We don't need to change it. But the 3D was absolutely incredible in IMAX. And when the high frame rate stuff wasn't distracting me, it was just gorgeous to watch. Marvel, in the last phase, sort of come back to that old thing, has been really frustrating just because of the way it just throws everything at the screen for you and goes, look how big this is, you'll love it. And then they get, you know, billions of dollars and it works for them. But it's nice to see a big blockbuster that just takes its time with things. You know, it's not afraid to take as long as it needs to do things. And so that middle hour of this film, gorgeous stuff when they're just hanging out in the ocean. As soon as they started making friends with whales, I was in. I was just completely in. 3.5 stars for Avatar: The Way of Water. Then I rewatched what is another one of my favorite films from 2022, Everything Everywhere All at Once. And this film just continues to get better and better on rewatch. I love it so much. It's so effortlessly creative. I've got a full review for it in the channel. Link in the description below if you want to go see my full thoughts on it. Just stupid good is all I need to say at this point. Just amazing. Everything about this film works for me. It's so chaotic and frantic. 5 stars for Everything Everywhere All at Once. Then on the 28th, I watched About Fate, which is another straight-to-streaming rom-com, which I wanted to check out because I enjoy the people in it. It's got Emma Roberts and I can't remember the dude's name, but I love him from Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. Again, a borderline nonsensical rom-com which highlights my exact point that you need good chemistry and that you need people that you enjoy watching on screen to get you over certain hurdles. This does have that, but has a lot of other problems which pull it back. So I love watching those two on screen, but everything else was a bit, come on. Such a weird clinical feel to this rom-com where the leads live in the employee town from Severance, I guess. Weird clinical looking film, like everything down to the look, the framing, the cinematography, the music, that is this weird kind of stock music. Everything felt stupidly clinical and grey, which didn't help this film. It was just begging for a bit of life in it. 2.5 stars for About Fate. And then we finished the month off on an entirely different film to rom-coms. Very much not a rom-com. All Quiet on the Western Front, which is a German war film that released on Netflix this year. Or last year. I've got to get used to that now. We're in January, let me off. Very impactful, impressively made war flick. Pretty much hits all the beats we've come to expect. Performances kept me engrossed, a lot of really captivating emotion there, but I was sort of distracted by how digital it all looked. Yeah, very digital looking. Like, not like to the point where I'd say that it all looks bad. Like, there's some great VFX stuff going on here, and it creates scenes and moments and battle areas effectively enough to get across the gravity of what it's going for. But it did look very digital, like a lot of fake smoke and fake blood and fake atmosphere that just always looked like it'd be composited, which I found to be quite distracting. And that's one of the aspects which I think maybe would have helped seeing in a cinema. It does feel a lot like the better version of 1917 in many ways. An infinitely more engrossing, captivating, and better pulled off film that didn't need the whole one-shot gimmick to do it. Who'd have thought? 3.5 stars for All Quiet on the Western Front. And with that, we come to the end of December and November. Solid couple of months of movie watching there. Shame I got very, very ill. But, you know, that always just leads to more wholesome and heartwarming watches. I would say that looking at those 2 months, I've hit the quota that I set for myself of getting a classic and a terrible film in there each month. I think we did it, so can I get a round of applause or something from you guys? Anything? But of course, this is the time where I ask you to let me know what you guys were watching at the end of last year through November and December. What Christmas films did you get watched? What films delivered? Any good first-time watches? Any terrible watches? Let me know anything you watched down in the comments down below. We'll have a little chat. And please do recommend some films for me to watch that we can chat about in the next last month on Letterboxd or the one after that. At any point, give me your film recommendations down there. I'm always wanting them. I'm always wanting to buff up that watch list. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see me talk about more shit, go ahead and click subscribe. Buttons down there for that, as well as my links to my social and, more importantly, my Letterboxd account, which is where I'm obviously updating more regularly everything that I've been watching. I will see you guys very soon for more content on the channel. It's going to be a stacked end of the month with my best of last year list and a bunch of other bits of content I'm really excited to get making for you guys. 2023 is going to be a stacked one. I guarantee it. I promise you. But until next time, I'm off to go and do something probably incredibly reckless and rewatch, I think, After Sun on Mubi. So God bless my soul. Please all pray for me. Prayers up for Stu. Oh God, is the entire cast of Dune Part 2 in my throat because it feels like a desert.